I've got a great puzzle for you this week. It's white to play. And this is taken from the game Gerardo Barbero, playing white from Argentina against John Fedorowicz from the USA. Yeah, the mighty Fed. Played in Buenos Aires, 1991. White to play. Well, you can see that white looks like in a bit of trouble. There's a threat to check here. It just looks pretty nasty, and make a new queen as well. So white needs something pretty drastic. So it's time to look at those forcing moves. Well, you could try a check, but no, that doesn't cut it, because in fact, well, black eventually escapes these checks, and I won't go into detail, but that's not working for white. So the move to consider, the only other sensible forcing move, is, of course, wait for it, white to play, rook takes bishop check. Now you've got to get the check right. Got to check with the queen somewhere. Well, queen e6 just doesn't cut it, because black's king escapes the check. So you've got to find queen h8 check. Now, black can go wrong straight away with rook h7, and then that's mate in a couple of moves. That's easy. So there's a forced move, king g6. Now that leads the king onto a very unfortunate square, allowing the knight fork, check, and attacks the queen. So the king moves, and knight takes queen. But it's not all over, because black gets a new queen. So we've got a material balance of rook against knight and two pawns. So far so good. So white has avoided the immediate danger. Is there more than a draw here? Of course, I mean, there are many ways for white to draw by perpetual check, just by checking with the queen. But white can actually win this position. You need to recognize a beautiful and deadly motif. So I repeat, if white gives random checks, then there's nothing more than a draw. But there's a check which is not so random, and that is queen d8 check. Now that's the beautiful move. Look, white's queen is in the same line as black's queen. Aha! So these squares are mined. Where does the king go? Can't go here because of knight e5. Check. And then you take the queen. And of course the same happens if king g6, then knight f4. Check. Nice discovered attack. So there's only one way for black to avoid immediate material loss, and that is rook e7. And this is actually the game continuation, and here Barbero played queen d6. And that was only good enough to draw. I'll show you that in a second. But there is a win for white. Can you spot it? e5 check. Now again, if the king moves to one of these squares, then white wins with a discovered check, discovered attack. The king has to keep hold of that rook. So for example, king g5, queen takes rook check is just winning. So king f7. Okay, what now? Well, white is winning with e6 check. So again, king takes pawn, knight allows this nice discovered attack. So the king has to keep hold of the rook. King f6. And queen f8 check. So that's the tricky one. So the king has to take the pawn, otherwise the rook drops. And white wins with knight c5 check. So if the king steps up, then queen takes rook. And here's the point. The king is dragged, kicking and screaming to the d-file. And then you give a check. And thank you very much. You take the queen with a very easy win. Queen against rook. Wow. That's a forced sequence. Black cannot avoid that. Let's just have a quick action replay. So phase 1, check with the rook, sacking the exchange. And now we come on to phase 2. White has a draw, but there's more than that with queen d8 and e5. And there we go. Queen f8 and knight c5 check. An incredible sequence, and white wins. Absolutely brilliant. In the game, Barbero played queen d6 check. Who knows whether there was time pressure involved. But the game went like this. And although Barbero is 2 pawns up in this queen and pawn endgame, in fact, white's king is too exposed and the game ended in a draw. Fantastic stuff. If you want to replay that, look at the whole game. It's actually a really interesting game, very interesting King's Indian. Then do check out the link to chesspuzzle.net and you'll find lots more interesting puzzles there as well. Thanks for watching.